The Sele had openly mocked Earth's primitive technology, until the day a young Sele girl's life depended on the heroism of a lone human mechanic. Jerry Coleman wiped sweat from his brow as he finished welding a damaged panel on the aging space station's hull. First contact with the advanced Sele race had been a disappointment. The aloof aliens saw humans as barely evolved primates, hardly worth acknowledging. A flicker of movement caught Jerry's eye. A small Sele shuttle docked at the station, highly irregular. Sele avoided human facilities like the plague. His curiosity grew as a single Sele female disembarked, her body language radiating fear. Suddenly, 3 hulking Sele warships locked onto the station. A dozen burly Sele males stormed out, charging into the docking bay with weapons drawn. "Emergency evacuation. All personnel get to escape pods now." The human security chief's panicked voice crackled over Jerry's radio. Heart-pounding, Jerry made a split-second decision. Dropping his tools, he raced for the airlock, determined to investigate. Screw evacuation orders. As the airlock cycled open, an explosion rocked the bay. Gravity failed and Jerry hurtled into a wall, blacking out. Plasma blasts and shrill screams snapped him awake. The Sele girl cowered behind a disintegrating supply crate, a dozen rifle muzzles aimed at her head. Ignoring the stars whirling in his vision, Jerry launched himself at the girl, tackling her behind a pillar as the crate buckled under a plasma barrage. Wide-eyed with terror, she clung to him, Sele males advancing with murderous intent. "Behind you!" she suddenly shrieked. Jerry pivoted just as another assailant fired. No time to dodge. He instinctively shielded the girl with his own body, praying the station's hull plating in his work suit stopped the lethal red energy bolt. If he died now, dozens more innocents would perish. Their only chance of survival was the battered mechanic they laughed behind her. The plasma bolt tore through Jerry's spacesuit, searing into his flesh. Sickening agony ripped through his shoulder. Jerry let out a strangled scream, crashing to the ground and almost crushing Ymir. But he couldn't fail now, not with her life on the line. He shielded her small body with his own, as the brutal Sele males converged on them. The acrid stench of his own scorched skin filled the air. Ymir's eyes were wide with horror, but she acted fast. Her nimble fingers snatched an emergency pressure seal from her belt, slapping it over the gaping hole in Jerry's suit. The seal engaged with a hiss, halting the deadly loss of air. Teeth clenched so hard his jaw ached, Jerry forced himself to move through the pain. A severed metal strut lay nearby, blasted off in the firefight. He grabbed it and swung hard at the closest Sele's legs. The makeshift club connected with a sickening crack. The brute toppled, plasma rifle clattering to the deck. Jerry dove for the fallen weapon. Another energy bolt sizzled past, barely missing him. He had no choice but to roll away, leaving the rifle out of reach. "Come on," he yelled, seizing Ymir's hand. Half dragging the terrified girl, he sprinted for the airlock on the far side of the bay. Plasma blasts flashed around them, deadly bolts of light in the smoky air. A sinister hissing noise rose above the chaos. A stray shot had ruptured the station's hull. Air started venting into the void with a ghostly shriek. The Sele leader shouted a command. Suddenly the hunters were the ones fleeing, racing back to their ships before they were caught in the decompression. With mere seconds to spare, Jerry hauled Ymir into the airlock. He slammed his fist on the controls and the hatch sealed behind them. Jerry sagged against the wall, gasping in sweet oxygen as the pressure equalized. Ymir stared up at him, her expression caught between residual fear and stunned gratitude. "You saved me," she said, her English halting but clear. "Why?" Before Jerry could even begin to form a response, the comm panel next to them crackled to life. "Incoming transmission from Sele High Command," a strained human voice announced. "They're demanding we turn over the girl immediately or face severe consequences. Coleman, what the hell is going on down there?" Jerry met Ymir's petrified gaze, a cold knot of dread tightening in his gut. Swallowing hard, he reached out and keyed the mic with a trembling, blood-streaked hand. "Sir," he said hoarsely, "we've got a problem." The conference room felt like a pressure cooker. the air thick with tension and barely restrained hostility. Jerry shifted in his seat, the movement sending a fresh wave of pain lancing through his injured shoulder. Across the table, the station commander's face was etched with worry lines, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the table. The security chief stood rigidly behind him, hand resting on the butt of his holstered pistol. On the wall screen, the Sile High Commander's image loomed large, his reptilian features twisted into a mask of cold fury. "You will surrender the criminal Emir to us at once," he growled, each word dripping with menace. "This is an internal Sile matter. Your interference will not be tolerated." The commander glanced at his security chief, a silent question passing between them. Taking a measured breath, he turned back to the screen. "With respect, Commander," he began carefully, "we have a duty to investigate any violent incidents that occur on our station, regardless of the perpetrator's race." The Sile's eyes narrowed to slits, his scales rippling with barely contained rage. "You forget your place, Earthling," he snarled. "You exist at our sufferance. Defy us, and your primitive species will face the consequences." Jerry felt Emir tremble beside him, her small hand clutching at his sleeve. As the commander bristled at the insult, Jerry cleared his throat. "If I may, Commander," he said, surprised at the steadiness of his own voice, "Emir has claimed asylum. Under both human and interstellar law, we're obligated to investigate her case before—" "Silence!" the Sile commander roared, slamming his fist against his console with such force that the image flickered. "You dare quote our laws to us? You whose kind scratches in the dirt while we stride among the stars?" His mandibles quivered with fury, flecks of spittle flying from his mouth. "Emir is no asylum seeker. She is a traitor to the Sile race, and she will be punished." Emir flinched as if struck, pressing herself closer to Jerry's side. He could feel her heartbeat racing through the thin fabric of her tunic. The human commander leaned forward, his expression hardening. "Then I'm afraid we're at an impasse, Commander," he said evenly. "I cannot in good conscience release Emir to you without due process. If you have evidence of her alleged crimes, I invite you to submit it through official channels. Until then, she will remain here under our protection, until our investigation is complete." The Sile commander's scales darkened to a deep, furious crimson, his eyes burning with barely contained rage. "You have one rotation to reconsider your position," he hissed, each word dripping with venom. "Return Emir to us, or we will take her by force, and Void help you if you stand in our way." With a final contemptuous glare, he reached out and cut the transmission, plunging the conference room into sudden, oppressive silence. For a long moment no one spoke, the weight of the Sile's threat hanging heavy in the air. Jerry could feel his heart pounding in his chest, adrenaline still surging through his veins. Beside him, Emir let out a shuddering breath, her grip on his arm tightening. The commander scrubbed a hand over his face, looking suddenly older and more exhausted than Jerry had ever seen him. "Well," he said grimly, breaking the silence at last. "That could have gone better." The security chief snorted humorlessly. "That's an understatement." He turned to Jerry, eyeing him appraisingly. "You've really stepped in it this time, Coleman. I hope you know what you're doing." Jerry swallowed hard, meeting Emir's frightened gaze. In truth, he had no idea what he was doing, or what might come next. All he knew was that he couldn't let this innocent girl be dragged back to face whatever horrors awaited her at the hands of her own people. "We can't let them take her," he said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. "We have to protect her." The commander sighed heavily, leaning back in his chair. "And we will," he promised. "But we need to be smart about this. The Sile aren't known for making idle threats. If we're going to defy them, we need to be prepared for the consequences." He turned to the security chief. "Double the patrols around the station perimeter. I want every inch of this place locked down tight, and get engineering working on boosting our shield strength. If the Sile do decide to come knocking, I want us ready." The security chief nodded sharply, already reaching for his comm unit. "On it, sir." As he strode from the room, barking orders into his mic, The commander turned back to Jerry and Ymir. His expression softened slightly as he took in the girl's terrified face. "It's going to be okay," he said gently. "We'll keep you safe, Ymir, I promise." But even as he spoke the words, Jerry couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled in the pit of his stomach. The Sele commander's final warning echoed in his mind, a chilling promise of retribution yet to come. One rotation. That was all the time they had bought themselves. One rotation before the full might of the Sele Empire came crashing down upon them. And Void helped them all if they weren't ready when it did. Jerry's blood ran cold as the hulking Sele male loomed over him, razor-sharp claws glinting in the dim light. The alien's eyes burned with a predatory hunger, his scaly lips pulled back in a vicious snarl. "Jerry!" Ymir cried out, her voice high and thin with terror. She pressed herself against the corridor wall, trying to make herself as small as possible. Jerry's mind raced, adrenaline surging through his veins. He had no weapons, no way to defend himself against the Sele's brutal strength. But he couldn't let this monster take Ymir, not after everything she'd risked to bring them the truth. "Run, Ymir," he yelled, never taking his eyes off the advancing Sele. "Get to the data core, I'll hold him off." Ymir hesitated, her wide eyes darting between Jerry and the snarling alien. "But—" "Go!" Jerry roared, throwing himself at the Sele in a desperate tackle. They crashed to the floor in a tangle of limbs, Jerry's injured shoulder screaming in protest. The Sele hissed in fury, his claws raking across Jerry's back, shredding through his uniform like tissue paper. Hot blood welled up, soaking the fabric. Jerry gritted his teeth against the pain, struggling to pin the alien's thrashing arms. But the Sele was too strong, his muscles coiled with an inhuman power. With a brutal twist, he threw Jerry off, sending him slamming into the wall with bone-jarring force. Stars exploded across Jerry's vision, the breath driven from his lungs. Through the ringing in his ears he heard the pounding of Ymir's retreating footsteps, fading into the distance. At least she was safe, for now. The Sele rose to his feet, his eyes glinting with cruel amusement. "Foolish human," he hissed, stalking forward. "You think you can stop me? I will tear the truth from the traitor's mind, and then I will flay the flesh from her bones." Jerry pushed himself up on shaking arms, his heart hammering against his ribs. He could taste blood in his mouth, coppery and thick. "You'll have to go through me first," he rasped, his voice raw with pain and defiance. The Sele chuckled, a cold, mirthless sound. "With pleasure." He lunged, claws outstretched, aiming for Jerry's throat. Jerry threw himself to the side, the alien's talons missing him by inches. He scrambled to his feet, backing away, his eyes darting desperately for anything he could use as a weapon. There, a fire extinguisher mounted on the wall. Jerry snatched it up, aiming the nozzle at the advancing Sele. "Stay back," he warned, his finger tightening on the trigger. "I don't want to hurt you, but I will if I have to." The Sele's lips curled in a mocking sneer. "As if your primitive toys could harm me." He took another step forward, his claws flexing with anticipation. Jerry's jaw tightened. He had no choice. He squeezed the trigger, sending a jet of icy foam blasting into the Sele's face. The alien howled in surprise and pain, staggering back, clawing at his eyes. Jerry didn't hesitate. Swinging the extinguisher with all his strength, he brought it crashing down on the Sele's skull with a sickening crunch. The alien crumpled, his body hitting the floor with a heavy thud. For a moment, Jerry just stood there, chest heaving, the extinguisher slipping from his numb fingers. The Sele lay motionless at his feet, dark blood pooling beneath his shattered head. But there was no time to catch his breath. Ymir was still out there, alone and vulnerable. Jerry had to find her, had to keep her safe. He turned and ran, ignoring the stabbing pain in his shoulder, the warm blood trickling down his back. The station's corridors blurred past, his footsteps echoing in the eerie silence. Jerry's heart pounded in his ears, a drumbeat of urgency driving him forward. He had to reach the data core before it was too late. Rounding a final corner, he skidded to a halt, his breath catching in his throat. The data core's heavy blast door stood open, the room beyond dark and still. And there, silhouetted in the doorway, was Ymir. But she wasn't alone. A massive Sele male loomed over her, his claws wrapped around her slender throat. Ymir's eyes were wide and terrified, her small hands scrabbling uselessly at the alien's iron grip. "No!" Jerry cried out, surging forward. But before he could take more than a step, a searing pain exploded in his back. He stumbled, his legs giving way beneath him. Dimly, through a haze of agony, he saw the Sele he thought he'd killed standing behind him, a jagged shard of metal clutched in his claws. The makeshift blade dripped with Jerry's blood, a cruel smile twisting the alien's lips. "Did you really think you could defy the might of the Sele Empire, human?" the alien hissed, his voice thick with contempt. "Your pathetic race is doomed, and now you will watch as we pry the truth from your precious Ymir's mind before we exterminate you all like the vermin you are." He raised the shard again, ready to plunge it into Jerry's heart. Jerry closed his eyes, bracing himself for the killing blow. But it never came. Suddenly, a blur of motion. Ymir wrenched the Sele's arm back with shocking strength. The alien howled in pain and fury. Jerry saw his chance. He drove his fist into the Sele's throat with every ounce of strength he had left. The Sele staggered back, gurgling horribly, clawing at its crushed windpipe. "Come on!" Jerry grabbed Ymir's hand and pulled her past the choking Sele. They ran, Jerry's heart pounding, Ymir's ragged breathing loud in his ears. The data core room loomed ahead, a promise of answers and hope. Jerry punched the door controls and they burst inside. As the door sealed behind them with a hiss, Jerry sagged against the wall, his whole body shaking. But there was no time to rest. "Hurry!" he urged Ymir, his voice raw. "We need that data!" Ymir nodded, her face set. She darted to the main console, her fingers flying over the controls with desperate speed. Jerry watched the screens flicker to life, dread coiling in his gut. At first, the information was just a blur of Sele's script and complex diagrams. But then, with a few keystrokes, Ymir brought up a translation, and Jerry's blood ran cold. It was all there. The Sele's plan laid out in horrifying detail. A genetically engineered virus, designed to ravage the human population while leaving Sele physiology untouched. Projections of casualty rates, the collapse of Earth's infrastructure, the dying screams of billions. And at the end, Earth, a shattered husk ripe for Sele conquest. "My God," Jerry breathed, his mind reeling. "We have to warn Earth, we have to—" The door exploded inward. The force of the blast lifted Jerry off his feet and sent him crashing into the far wall. Stars burst across his vision, the taste of blood sharp in his mouth. Through the smoke and ringing in his ears, Jerry saw Sele warriors pouring into the room, plasma rifles raised, and at their head, eyes blazing with unspeakable fury. The Sele High Commander himself. "You've seen too much," the commander snarled, his voice dripping with venom. "Now you will die with the rest of your pitiful species." He leveled his rifle at Jerry's chest. Jerry tried to move, to throw himself aside, but his battered body wouldn't obey. This was it then, the end. He braced himself for the searing agony of the plasma bolt, for the oblivion of death. But the bolt never came. Instead, a slender figure darted in front of him, arms outstretched. "No!" The scream tore itself from Jerry's throat as the plasma bolt ripped through Ymir's chest. She crumpled to the floor, dark blood already pooling beneath her. Jerry scrambled to her side, cradling her in his arms. Ymir looked up at him, her beautiful eyes already clouding, her breath coming in shallow, ragged gasps. "Jerry," she whispered, her voice so faint he had to strain to hear. "You have to stop them. Save your people." A single tear slid down her cheek. "Promise me." Tears blurred Jerry's vision, his chest so tight he could barely breathe. He nodded, fighting back a sob. "I promise," he choked out. A ghost of a smile touched Ymir's bloodied lips, and then with a final shuddering breath she went still. Her eyes stared sightlessly, the light in them gone forever. For a long moment, Jerry just knelt there holding her lifeless body, grief and rage and despair crashing over him in waves. Then, slowly, he laid her down, his hands shaking as he closed her eyes for the last time. He rose to his feet and turned to face the Sele, tears still streaming down his face. They stood there, a dozen rifles trained on his heart, the High Commander's face twisted in a cruel sneer. But Jerry barely saw them. His gaze had fallen on the control panel behind them, the station's reactor controls. A terrible, desperate calm settled over him. He knew what he had to do. "You want to destroy humanity?" he growled, his voice low and deadly. "Then I'll see you in hell." The High Commander's eyes widened, realization dawning. He opened his mouth to shout a warning. But it was too late. Jerry lunged forward, ignoring the searing pain of a plasma bolt grazing his side, ignoring the Sele's shouts and the clatter of rifles being raised. His hand slammed down on the self-destruct button. A klaxon blared, red lights flashing. The station shuddered beneath his feet, the first tremors of its impending destruction. Jerry straightened up and faced the Sele, a grim smile on his face. He saw the High Commander's face contort with horror and dawning defeat, saw the warriors lower their weapons in stunned disbelief. And then the world dissolved in searing white light. In the silence of space, the station exploded, a blinding flash that for a single heartbeat outshone the stars themselves. The fireball consumed the Sele ships, the debris and the virus that would have doomed humanity. In that instant, Jerry Coleman, the lone human mechanic who had sacrificed everything to save his species, became a legend, a hero whose name would be remembered and honored for generations to come. But for Jerry, floating in the eternal void, the cold of space leaching the last warmth from his dying body, there was only the bitter knowledge that no victory ever comes without a price, and some prices are higher than any one man should ever have to pay. His last thought as the darkness closed in was of Ymir, of her courage, her sacrifice. He had kept his promise, humanity would live on. But for him the void beckoned, a final endless sleep and a chance perhaps to see her once again. With that thought, that fragile hope, Jerry Coleman closed his eyes and embraced the darkness. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.